Hello, my fellow theatre people. Today we have a crossover event. It is Shaketube 2019 meets Middleton Tube 2019, which is an even smaller subset of BookTube. Wow. I don't know if we can get much smaller than this. I am doing the play Timmons of Athens as a part of Shaketube 2019, which is hosted by Jason at Old Blues Chapter and Verse, Lukas at Totally Pretentious, and Steve Donoghue, who has dropped his video, which is, I think, 9 minutes long. So if you want the short version of whatever the hell I'm going to say, and probably more correct and, with book learning and thoughts behind it, you should totally click onto his video down, which I'll put down in the top links down below, about this play, Timmons of Athens, which is one of these plays, which is the plays that we know it's not all Shakespeare, and we'll get to the kind of the Shakespeare, and was Shakespeare just this big thumping book, is this all Shakespeare, or is maybe quarter of it somebody else, maybe even more of it other folks? We'll get to that later, but first let's talk about the play Timmons of Athens. It's a play about this kind of Athenian gentleman in kind of ancient Athens, who is, at the start of this play, he is a rich guy, and he is super generous. He just gives his money away to everybody. He's like extravagant in how much the money that he gives away. He buys stuff, and he just sort of kind of fairly, I would say, editorializing fairly thoughtlessly, just sort of gives it to other people. There's a poet and a painter at the very beginning who are like, a patron, someone who can sponsor our art. But there's he helps get somebody out of jail. He rewards one of the great general of the day, Alcibiades, rewarding him, saying we don't reward our warriors enough in this society. But he's giving money to everybody and everything. Now in the background you can hear a steward kind of Lord, and it falls out that he's been giving away money so much that he's given away all his money. He's mortgaged all his land. There's the great anxiety, I guess, in the kind of the Elizabethan Jacobean time of, that people were going to get so much in debt, they were going to lose their land, which is for the aristocracy, that's what the base of your wealth, of your position is. And indeed, this is what this Timon of Athens has done, in Shakespeare's imagination has done. And he says it's no worries. I've been so generous to all my friends. He's always talking about, I'm not doing anything special. This is what mankind should be like. And you are my friends, and of course you're going to, I'm in trouble now, you're going to give me money and help me out. And suddenly all of these friends who are just so happy to sponge off him go to he also kind of holds lavish parties. There's this kind of Amazonian dance of these Amazonian women, which, funnily enough, I watched a Stratford Festival production of this glorious HD TV. I will put the link down to that below. And they kind of had this as almost like a Victoria's Secret stripper party kind of thing, which when you get to kind of later parts of the play actually makes sense. Though I'll get to that. I'll get to that later. So it's he's not just a philanthropist who's very kind of austerely doing this. No, he's living the high life, and he's making sure all his buddies get the high life. And surprise, once the high life dries up, all his friends are like, yeah, no, suddenly, no, I don't have any money. I just got money for myself, because they're the kind of selfish bastards who are going to go around and sponge off of some rich twerp until he doesn't have any money, and then they're going to move on to somebody else. And indeed, I think there's an implication that some of these people are also lenders to him and want their money back. So there is all that. And indeed, he has what I would consider maybe an actual true friend of, other than just, his servants, the steward, of Apamentus, who is this guy who comes into the party. And when he comes into the party at the beginning, you think, wow, man, it's like a real sourpuss, because he's saying these are not your friends. What you are doing they are doing this, and this is injury to you, sir. And he calls the poet a liar. It's like, well, how do you know I'm a liar? Are you a poet? Well, then you're a liar. Which, it's an interesting thing for a poet to be saying, Middleton and Shakespeare to be saying in this thing of like, to create, is that to create art is a lie, or is it to seek money and flattery, to flatter to get money? Is that's just like, by definition, you're in this for the money, so you are a liar. So yes, all that happens. None of the so-called friends help him. So he invites them all to a dinner. They all come to the dinner, and he explodes. He's like, here's food for you all, you guys. They pull up. They reveal the dishes, and it's all water and rocks, and he like throws it at them, and he just rages at them. It's like, you are not my friends. And suddenly he goes from this like, everybody's just wonderful, and I'm going to give everybody my money and everything, la la la, to the other extreme of extreme misanthrope. He hates mankind. He hates all mankind, and he curses them all. And indeed, the second half of this thing, you get happy-go-lucky dumbass Timon, and then you get Timon, who is living in a cave and is just and hates everyone. And of course, as an interesting thing, he's in this cave, and what does he find? He finds dugout, whether it's in the play version I saw, they just pulled out like boxes of cash, like it had been stowed there. But you could also just be like, naturally he just finds kind of gold in the ground or something like that. And he gets gold again. But this time he freaking hates mankind so bad that what's happened in the meantime is Alcibiades, this general, he in the play, he pleads for the life of a friend who has killed someone. He's apparently like maybe heat of the passion, but he's going to get super heavily punished, like it was premeditated, and it's going to be the harshest punishment. It's going to be death. And he gets pissed off about this. He gets so pissed off about this that Alcibiades says, well, fine, that's it. I'm leaving Athens as well, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to destroy this thing. And it's kind of like, wow, that is as extreme a turn as what Timon has. And he comes to Timon, and it's like, saying like, we're kind of like in that we both freaking hate Athens. And Timon is like, well, yes, you're gonna destroy Athens. Well, great. Here's money to destroy Athens. And I guess there's what are called mistresses of Alcibiades with him, which I guess is also it's prostitutes. At least that's how Timon addresses them and says like, great, you are prostitutes. I don't want you to change anything about yourselves, but here's money to make yourself more alluring so you can go and spread venereal disease in Athens. And indeed, there's the whole thing of kind of prostitution, basically of money making a whore of society is a definite theme in this book. In this play, it's like, it's very much about kind of the debasement or the debasement, the dehumanization, the just like, gift economy, kind of even kind of a more base thing of gift economy. It's like you can only give a gift because you're expecting something back. And indeed, you can look at Timon and his rage at not getting his gifts back once after he's paid so much into this bank. That's maybe the only kind of understandable way you can say that Timon is why he's enraged at the end, that he's put all this money into the gift economy bank, that he's not getting anything back. So I'm going to freaking destroy Athens because they've cheated me. They've cheated me out of what should be my just things. I poured all my wealth into them. They should pour it all back into me when I need it. And so, yeah, it's this crazy flip. Alcibiades does use the money. He goes to the gates to destroy Athens. The Athenians immediately come out and kind of like bargain with him. And in the end, Alcibiades is like, okay, well, you welcome back, Timon, you deal good with him. At which point news comes in off stage, and of Timon, who has been just he's dying. He wants to die, that he has died, and he dies off thing. We don't know if it's like, he just basically willed himself to die, whether he committed suicide. We get a variety of different epitaphs. It's confusing. Like I listened to Emma Smith's who does This is Shakespeare, the book that I'm reading this month. She also does the podcast, and in the podcast she does talk about this play and saying like, in a tragedy, in a Shakespearean tragedy, this is, obviously not solely Shakespearean, but you expect this to be, his death scene. There should be a death scene of Timon, and it should be the big focal point. It should be what does she call it? She calls it basically, this should be the spotlight. This is the version of the spotlight moment where the actor gets to act, and you get that, big moment. But instead, we just get people coming in and reading his epitaph, various different epitaphs, and it's just kind of like, it's like it's a kind of deflation, a denouement, which, I mean, it sort of works with this weird play, because as I'm watching it, it's like okay, a guy who charity isn't about just shoving money at anybody. That is like being an idiot. It's sort of like someone talking about, like, turning the other cheek. I'm not a Christian, and I'm probably getting all my theology wrong, but turning the other cheek isn't being a doormat. There's a thoughtfulness. There's a you're going to be a human being, but you're going to expect the other person to be a human being too. There's like, you want them to enter into kind of that kind of relationship with you. It's not about, it's kind of like S&M, like, oh my God, just whack me and that'll make me a wonderful person or something. Or maybe I went to the wrong place there, but and that's the thing I get about kind of Timon of Athens charity. I so much want to say Timon of Athens charity is, it just seems like it's not charity. I mean, I think that kind of the idea of the gift economy is this thing of like, he's giving and giving, but it's not actual charity. It's him expecting to get stuff at the end, and that betrayal is why the psychology there. It's very kind of I guess I guess it isn't, because you think about nowadays, there's people who do stuff because they do stuff, and it's like they're not expecting any repayment. I can see a very, very different character from Timon who would do all this and would get pushed out into the wilderness, and they'd be like, yeah, okay, I guess that's what's going to happen, and I'm just going to continue on my life, and it wouldn't cause this giant flip in their character. Whereas someone like Timon is very much, I'm doing all this charity, but it's not charity. It is me. I'm expecting that this is making me a great man, and that people will respect me. At least that's how you have to kind of like, I think that's how you have to kind of project, how I project kind of like, if there's a psychology here, that's the kind of psychology. So yeah, I guess that's my thoughts on the play. I really like the interplay between Timon and Epaminondas, as this kind of, he is just throughout the play. There's one point where they're in the wilderness, and Epaminondas is still there, and he's still like the only friend. But at this point, Timon is just like, he's just like, they hurl insults at each other, and it's just like this kind of weird buddy comedy in the middle of this play, which, it's weird. It's probably much more a satire than it is. It's not the tragedy of Timon. It's just Timon of Athens, and it doesn't feel like a tragedy in that sense of, it feels like a guy who was really dumb at the beginning and is dumb at the end, and we're just getting to see the full scope of the guy, and Shakespeare and Middleton's kind of guesses what that is about, and probably also just commenting on kind of the psychology, a certain kind of a thing of just kind of psychology, the kind of the idea of money, and the kind of the economy of relationships, of how we as human beings will help each other, and help each other when we help each other disinterestedly, and when we help each other because we want something in return. And this is definitely, we want something in return. This apparently was one of Karl Marx's favorite plays, which I don't put that on the cover of Timmons of Athens. 2 thumbs up from Karl Marx. I'm sure that will draw in the punters. So let me switch from that to this idea, which I actually is probably maybe more interesting, which of course is why I've buried it 15 minutes into a video, is the idea of authorship in Shakespeare, because I've heard a lot. I've been heard and been deeply uninterested in the idea that Shakespeare didn't write his own plays. That said, of plays that were written at this time, it's sort of a well accepted thing that most other playwrights at the time, that they all collaborated, there were different hands in plays, but that is something that Shakespeare has been was excluded from for a long time. This is Shakespeare. These are Shakespeare's plays, and indeed the first folio, which is the first appearance of this play in print, was sort of the start of the idea of the Shakespeare brand. These are the works by Shakespeare, and there are no other names on these plays. Interestingly, Timon of Athens was a last-minute replacement, or a last-minute kind of filler, because they were having trouble getting the rights to Troilus and Cressida. So they quickly grabbed out this play and put it and stuck it in, because they didn't think they were going to get Troilus and Cressida. So there's a good chance that actually, if they didn't have that kind of publishing troubles, that Timon of Athens would have never actually kind of survived, would have survived, the wash of time. It would have been a lost play. And I mean, and there's a lot of debate. There's been a lot of debate whether, who was the other author. At this point, it seems that it's accepted that Thomas Middleton was the co-author of this. For a long time, it was like, he just took something of Shakespeare's and he kind of rewrote, or he put little things in. But there's been actually, I guess, computer analysis of kind of just sort of certain kind of phrasing and stuff like that. And it's actually pretty kind of mixed in between, though they do say that, certain scenes, I'm not going to go through them, seem to be more recognizably one author or the other. But that comes down to the whole thing of that playwriting, sort of like you think about TV or movies or even theater today, was a collaborative thing, that there were many hands in it. Sometimes it's funny, you think about like kind of the Hollywood system, and in the end, there's some kind of complicated little structure thing of who gets the final credit on the movie, even though it's kind of well known that there could be a variety of different authors behind the scenes who just don't get the credit. And you get that same kind of impression with Shakespeare, that like something like Middleton is somebody who they've seemed to have found evidence of his work on plays like Macbeth and Measure for Measure. So for plays that are really at the heart of, are solidly at the heart of Shakespeare's canon, not just kind of an outlier like Timon of Athens, but what they found is that in some of those cases, what the case might be is he didn't actually kind of write with Shakespeare at the time, but that with kind of the necessities, like what happens is, like, Shakespeare has sold his plays to the theater group, that's the King's Company. I can't even remember it right now, but he would have sold it to the company, and then the company would have this play, and then there would be kind of the how many players do we have to put it on? How much time do we have to put it on? Oh crap, there's been censorship laws put in place. We need to rewrite this scene. Or, we're in the middle of a war with this country, so we need to kind of excise this or play up this, or, all these different little considerations. They would hire it seems like they would hire other playwrights to kind of come in and, tweak the play so it's kind of right for right now. And the thing is that was going along all the way up until these plays were then collected. And so what you get collected might not necessarily be the original pure, this is what Shakespeare wrote at the initial time. This might be a play that was, Shakespeare may have collaborated with the actors of the time when it was first getting produced, gets a bit changed there, but then even post that, all these other different changes different hands coming in, doing little alterations, maybe playing up a part because they have a certain actor with them. This is me doing my speculation, but I just thinking about that kind of messy kind of thing. So you end up with complete works of Shakespeare, but it might be the complete works of Shakespeare with a variety of folk put in place. There's the Oxford University version of the play, that's saying that that the evidence suggests that Middleton wrote about 1/3 of the play, mostly the central scenes. The editor of Oxford edition, John Giles, states that Middleton wrote the banquet scene 2, the central scene with Timmons' creditors, and Alcibiades' confrontation with the Senate, and most of the episode figuring with the steward. The play's abrasive, harsh humor and its depiction of social relationships that involve denial of personal relationships are Middleton's traits. There's also it was interesting, Emma Smith was talking about this play, saying that this is much more of a city comedy, which isn't something that Shakespeare is actually, isn't one of his strengths. And, there's varying theories about this play. Is this a play where, Shakespeare was the senior guy and, Middleton was, he's the guy who's kind of helping Shakespeare along? Or is this a case of it's an older playwright who's sort of, his days have passed a little bit? Like the kind of romantic comedies that he wrote are a bit out of fashion, and it's actually the hot thing is these city comedies. And so Shakespeare's come in to try and maybe you can help me with the city comedy stuff, and we can make something up. It's like you don't really know. It's like, is this value? We're going to value youth over kind of an older, kind of maybe past his prime playwright. They talk about how Middleton's language is actually a lot more is more modern, and Shakespeare has kind of an older language. Middleton's much more into rhyme, whereas later Shakespeare is very kind of unrhymed. It's like all these things of who's helping who, and we have our expectations of this is Shakespeare, the great genius, and no one could adulterate his stuff, and only stuff that's pure Shakespeare can be literature. But there's a lot more. There's a lot of the works that we might consider. It's that idea of we have this kind of, this is the birth in some ways. I wonder if this is kind of a birth of the idea of sole authorship, of the one great genius. Shakespeare being God, you got to think that's the big poster child for the great modern, kind of the birth of the modern genius author, which is you think is a myth right up until today of authors are working in collaboration, like writing novels are in and just nonfiction books. Let me get nonfiction books. They're in collaboration with editors, with various readers, with people who, their agents, all the people who help shape a book say no, that's not quite right. Try this again, or here, let's try it this way, depending on how hands-on they are or not. And you get back to someone like Shakespeare is the kind of the birth of that, of we're just going to say it's one guy. It's only one guy who's done this. And indeed, I don't think I'm pulling away saying this has been written by a committee. I probably do still lean on this is mostly Shakespeare. I haven't turned to conspiracy theories yet. Though it's interesting. I wonder sometimes if the conspiracy theorists, they're given heat and there's a weight there because actually this is a collaborative art. Shakespeare has worked with a variety of people in his career, whether that's actors or other writers, or post him being around, other people have modified his works. And indeed, I think about all the stage plays, the stage productions, or the movies I've seen of this. Shakespeare gets rewritten. He gets reordered. And the only reason that we consider this as definitively Shakespeare is because this is what got ossified. It's almost like it's an oral tradition. In a way, it's like Homer and all that kind of shifting, swirling stuff got nailed down into one definitive version, and then that became the canon. And it's like, is this the Homer? Is this the Homer? Is this the swirling, shifting version? We could have gotten the Branagh version versus the Mel Gibson version of Hamlet, and they're both equally valid until finally one came into print, and then that became the definitive Hamlet. I haven't watched Jason's video on Hamlet yet. I'll have to do that next too. So yeah, I think it was like Timon of Athens. I would actually recommend, if you're interested in watching someone mount this play, the Stratford. I'll put a link down below to the Stratford Festival. Apparently it is you can actually watch them worldwide, and they have a good variety of different plays, and one of them is, because they're going to do apparently the entire works of Shakespeare, it's like a 10-year project, and it's going to be available to the world. You'll have to click down below and let me know if that's actually true, if you were in a different place other than Canada. But they're going to mount all these plays, and Timon of Athens was an interesting experience. It's interesting. They had kind of like Victoria's Secret stripper Athenians, but I think they cut the kind of the prostitutes. At least that's my impression. I thought it was just other soldiers with Alcibiades for that scene. So they made him less misogynistic when he's being a misanthrope. So interesting choices. So there's like little rewrites, little ways of trying to make it work as a play, which I like, and then you can bounce off the text. It's interesting you look at Shakespeare himself and him taking the story of Timon of Athens, very much more emphasizing both halves, the rich Timon with the poor misanthropic, because apparently it's primarily misanthropic Timmons comes down from the sources. And then there's someone like Alcibiades, who was historical general, famous for his betrayal of Athens, who seemed, in historical sense, to have a lot more reasons to maybe have beefs against Athens, or to turn on people. Like, he's accused of sacrilege and driven out of the city. It's like he seems a lot more justified in his historical aspect than kind of rather just like kind of overreacting, but a kind of a nice, I guess, as a pair to Timon. So yeah, I'm gonna go watch Steve Donoghue's video on this right now, and hear what he has to say about it, which I'm sure will be much more illuminating than this. But yes, so Shaketube continues. One more week. This is my final video of the day. One more week of 3 plays. The next 3 plays being Measure for Measure, The Winter's Tale, and Henry VIII. Actually, I think all 3 are Stratford Festival productions. If you want to see kind of professionally done and filmed, it's done on the stage, but it's very much filmed for the cameras, so it works really well that way. They did a really good Hamlet as well. They've done Coriolanus. Actually, I think they seem to be rolling them out this thing, and there's actually a Coriolanus on there that I haven't seen, which, well, I was pretty lucky. I got to see the Ralph Fiennes one, but yeah, there's a Coriolanus down there, Alba. If you are listening, that's something you could look and see if it actually works, because you are not in Canada. Hello to yes. So yeah, that's all I have to say for now. More videos later.